video is brought to you by the censorship-hating crew over at nightsolarlight.com. This brand new ultra-bright wireless floodlight with motion detector makes it super easy to light up all the dark spots in your yard. You can install it anywhere because it's wireless, and you never need to worry about buying batteries because it's powered by the sun with a high-capacity battery storage bank and frickin' bright LED lights. Don't spend hundreds of dollars on floodlights. Go to nightsolarlight.com and get 52% off with free shipping. The link is in the description. Just real quick, Kamala Harris hosts a all-female senators event for Evening of Relationship Building at Vice President's residence. What if Donald Trump said, I'm only inviting all males to my dinner? Or any male. You'd never hear the end of it, man. This is exclusionary. Ain't no inclusion going on here. I ain't feeling it, Camel Toe. Camel Toe Harris held a private dinner Tuesday night for the female U.S. senators to show bipartisan support among a deeply divided Congress. It was the first known time that Harris hosted lawmakers, female lawmakers, in the vice presidential residence at the Naval Observatory since moving in April. CNN previously reported that Harris had invited 24 female senators. What if somebody goes, yeah, I want you to show up, but you need to be male and white. Only white male. This is only for white males. It's really nothing. It's nothing against the rest of you guys. This is just all white males. Oh my God, they'd still be talking. If he did it at the beginning of his presidency, they'd still be talking about it. You know he's a racist when you. It's like, okay, so what are you guys inviting all females? I'm not going to go much into this, but this is just very interesting. This is an example of turning a blind eye to the same quote. I'm not even calling this an indiscretion, but I'm just putting it in quotes because that's how they would treat it if somebody invited all white males to their little dinner party. What do you mean you're not going to invite black men? What do you mean you're not going to invite women? What do you mean you're not going to invite Asian? What do you mean all white male? What else could this possibly mean? CNN would say. This is interesting to me because these two, this is Sagar, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but this guy is Sagar, and her name is Crystal Ball, and that's funny, Crystal Ball. They did an interview on their podcast with Joe Rogan, and I thought they asked some interesting questions, and I thought Joe Rogan gave some interesting answers. Listen to this. I love the psychology of this kind of stuff because you know a psyop is working here. You know Joe Rogan, with the influence he has and the audience he's accumulated and the worldwide reach he has in his grasp, he could change the world with the message of freedom and truly set brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. But what does he end up doing? He ends up kowtowing to politics, as he says he doesn't kowtow to politics, endorsing Bernie Sanders or throwing out a potential endorsement for Tulsi Gabbard and saying he's... And Joe Rogan knows about the Federal Reserve. He knows about the trashing of the U.S. dollar, the Petro Reserve recycling scheme, and all this kind of stuff. Dude, wouldn't it be awesome if one of us in the room actually appeared on a Joe Rogan podcast and be allowed 2.5, 3 hours to talk about what really needs to be talking about? And really press on the people who are hearing, this is something you guys need to understand. This is what is going on. This is what politics is. It is the clever and deceptive art of using euphemisms, lies, emotionalism, and fear-mongering in order to dupe average people like you and me into accepting and even demanding the chains of our own enslavement, and we got to ditch it. Like yesterday. But listen to Crystal Ball and Sagar interview Joe Rogan. Listen to the question they ask and the answer he gives.
I want to start by asking you, how do you think about your political philosophy, and who do you consider to be some of the influences on how you think about those things?
My political philosophy is very mixed, right? It's like I like a lot of different people's ideas, but ultimately all I really want...
Yeah, that was actually pretty funny, Politically Atheist. I did see that. Can somebody pull up the clip where Joe Rogan blasts Brian Stelter? See, that's what I love about this. That's what I love about this. This is kind of like a podcast, but this is an interactive podcast where you guys bring up stuff that I didn't think about that works perfectly and is absolutely relevant with what we're talking about. That's something I definitely want to add to this. So if you can bring up that clip where Joe Rogan blasts Brian Stelter, it was pretty classic, and a lot of things that, probably most of the things that Joe Rogan said about Brian Stelter and CNN was absolutely true.
Is what's better for people. You know, I don't really have a vested interest in business. I'm not looking to like protect assets or anything weird, and I want people to have freedom. So in all ways, you know, and I think that
if that was true, and he stuck to that consistently, that would be fantastic, because that's what we all want. But what does he mean by that?
When I look at politics, I look at like these utopian concepts about like what's possible, and then I look at what's what we have going on right now, and I wonder.
Joe, what are some of the formative political experiences of your life?
Well, I mean, I remember the first time I really got interested in politics was when Ronald Reagan couldn't remember whether or not he sold arms to Iran.
Iran-Contra.
Yeah. I was like 21 years old, 21 years old. And I remember
Podcaster Joe Rogan.
Like, what is happening? Because I always thought of presidents as, you know, you have a leader, and this leader is trying to do the best for the country, and we all respect the office of the president. And back then, that was really the case. Like back then, in the 1980s, there was way less inflammatory rhetoric. There was a lot of people that didn't like Reagan, but the level of I don't like Reagan was never like the level of I don't like Trump.
Right.
Or now, currently, Obama, or Biden rather, is senile. Like there's a disrespect of Biden that didn't exist back then. And as a young man trying to figure out what was going on in the world, seeing that there's this guy who's clearly lying.
That was sort of a watershed thing for me. When you watch that Reagan tape, when you know the guy is frickin' making this stuff up, he's reading his teleprompter like he should be, but there's no conviction in his voice or in his eyes. You know something was up. That's one part of this interview that I thought was interesting. He brings up a good point there
about selling weapons to someone who hates it. There was a guy named Jimmy Tingle. He's a hilarious comedian out of Boston, and he had a great bit about this that he would do in a heavy Boston accent. He goes, "Mr. President, if you ever sell arms to people who hate us in the future, jot it down." He goes, "Put it on a post-it note. Stick." Like, do you know who Jimmy Tingle is?
No, I didn't know who he was.
A great political comedian. It was him and Barry Crimmins and Jimmy Credico. There was a few of these guys that were like really politically aware comics. Barry Crimmins in particular, who was really the head of the like, if there was a godfather of Boston comedy, it was Barry Crimmins, because he was the most intelligent, he was the most well-read, the most politically aware, and he would be involved in a lot of like political demonstrations and all these different things, and he was kind of the guy who kept the Boston comedians honest. He kept them from being hacks, and he was just a very, very politically aware guy.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Tingle was aligned with him. He was one of those guys as well, who initially started out as just a regular comic and then became much more of a political comic, and then ultimately became a guy. I don't think he does really comedy shows as much as he does like one-man shows now. But Tingle's bits about it made me think about it a lot, and then watching, you know, the Oliver North thing on television and the Contras and the Nicaraguas and all that stuff. And then eventually, when I did the podcast later, getting to interview Rick Ross, the real Rick Ross, not the rapper.
Right.
The real Rick Ross.
The Rick Ross story is very, very fascinating. This guy thought he was just making it on his own, and he was totally being used as a pawn so that they could buy the arms for the Iran-Contras, or just one of the pawns.
Rapper named himself.
This guy, Rick Ross, was so good at what he did, and he had his operation so streamlined. He basically had what amounts to a drive-through service thing, where instead of driving through and getting a burger and fries, you drive through and got Coke and Valley, just whatever you wanted. whatever you wanted.
After, who is the guy who is selling coke in South Central, making
God.
millions and millions of dollars,
Tens
to
of millions.
fund
Right.
The Contras, right.
and he didn't know. He had no idea
Oh
what
my
was going on.
God.
He had no idea. He thought he was just like so slick that he could stay operated. He literally did not know that that they were allowing him to do this.
And so when you pulled that thread, like from that Reagan moment, was that like led to more skepticism of politicians, led for you to think that they're all liars or it's corrupt, or sort of like where did that thread lead?
Well, I think when you're a 20-year-old, 21-year-old person, your brain's not really fully formed. So you think a lot of like scrambled thoughts. And I think I was too busy with my own life to spend too much time thinking about politics, but I was super aware that it's not what I thought it was, which was like one of the themes of my life. Like as I got older, more aware, like, oh, everybody pretends that this makes sense. This doesn't make any sense. Like, oh, everybody pretends that there's a system in place. It's like really like it's well-meaning and it's really fair and it's going to benefit everybody. It took a while to slowly unpeel the onion, and that was probably one of the first things was seeing Reagan say that. Was Reagan
Sort of like spoiled the illusion.
Well, it was just so obviously bullshit.
People always ask, they're like, what does Joe believe? And I'm like, look, I think it's
They should have explored this more, because that does help you to peer in. It kind of breaks the fabric of the matrix, and the illusion gets dispelled and the smoke starts clearing. And when you start seeing that this person that was so venerated by so many people, i.e. Ronald Reagan, because a lot of people liked him, even a lot of Democrats liked him. They thought that he was a good speaker, and he was. If you've ever seen the 1950 and 60s speeches that he gave, he was really good. He was witty. He was funny. He could engage the audience. He was quick-witted before he started taking a mental turn for the worse. And when you see this guy sitting behind the desk called Resolute at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and you didn't know any better before, well, you can't, you can't turn back. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. And to be able to try to get yourself convinced that you don't know it anymore, and then you go back, now you just double diluted yourself. So that's why this is amazing to me. Once you see that kind of stuff, you know what politics is all about. You know they're all frickin' liars. Somebody was that good and had it put up a good face. Sure, you'll be able to see through the clear charlatans like the tricky Dick Nixons or the Bill Clintons. But the Ronald Reagans, man, once that mask slips, it's all the jig's up, man. You know what's going on. You know who owns these people. You start to know why they're doing what they're doing. And then they all make the same policies, and the military industrial complex gets a little bit bigger, and the national debt just goes up just a little bit more, and your dollar seems to buy just a little bit less. And you know what's going on. You know it.
like a skepticism of power. That's like the bedrock thing. And so Reagan was the genesis of that. Because if I were to throw a thread through all like your takes on politics, it's always something along the lines of, I'm not sure if I believe what that person is saying.
Yeah.
Like, is that where it comes from?
He was the first guy that I realized was the president, but also full of shit. And I was like,
that's a seminal moment, honestly.
Because
for me, it was Iraq. Right.
Yeah, I remember watching, there was something on television about Nixon, about how, Watergate, and oh my God, he, bugged the opposition, and what a terrible person.
Nixon and Watergate and the phone call to the moon crew, and it's just all BS.
But then,
and this is the guy that's constantly wearing NASA jackets and NASA shirts.
Different people came along, and Gerald Ford was this bumbling guy, and then Jimmy Carter was like this really sweet guy, but couldn't really get the job done in terms of like getting the hostages released from Iran.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden Reagan comes along, and it's all, win one for the Gipper, and everybody's all rah rah America. And then, this was all when I was young, and as I was 20, 21, the whole Nicaragua Contra thing, and the Sandinistas, and watching that on television going, what the hell is going on here? Like, this is the president, he fucking remembers. I remember thinking that he fucking remembers. He's lying.
Right.
Maybe he didn't, honestly, because he was getting Alzheimer's, but most likely remembers.
No, he remembers.
He fucking knew. Is it uncomfortable for you how much unintentional power you have in the political sphere?
Yeah, it's weird. It's totally unintentional. That's why it's weird. It was there's no planning of any of this. It's just talking to people, and then all of a sudden, like, I still don't understand why it's so popular. I don't get it.
Really?
Like, I know a lot of other people do the same thing. I'm like, why is this fucking thing still #1?
And it is #1. Him and Howard Stern are the #1 listened to personalities on the planet right now. And each of them boast a salary of $100 million a year. At least he got a $100 million contract from Spotify. And I know that Howard Stern's contract is $100 million per year. But let me show you this. I think I found it. It's this New York Post. It's only a minute and 13 seconds, and it's not all of it because they add a little bit of their own stuff to it. But this is Joe Rogan going against Brian Stelter because Brian Stelter is jealous that CNN's ratings are slipping to YouTube influencers. Oops.
And slipping and
here we go.
Brian Stelter's show keeps slipping and slipping and slipping in the ratings.
He's the worst. And you know what they do?
Don Lemon, it's the same thing. Everybody knows that they're not real. They're not real humans.
That was an interesting statement. They're not real. They're not real humans. Talk about going out on a limb and basically making a smokescreen issue that doesn't need to be there. It's like, why not just stay with what you know and what you can prove? Interesting statement there. Joe Rogan slams Stelter after CNN host complained about losing viewers to YouTube personalities. Let me turn this down. Calling his show effing terrible in a fiery rant. It is. If you guys have ever watched Brian Stelter's reliable sources, it sucks. It sucks. It's not interesting. The things that they talk about don't, like, it doesn't keep your attention. You know, there are some things out there that CNN does put out that keep your attention way more than Brian Stelter. And this guy's he's one of the top guys over there in the CNN newsroom. The Outspoken podcast host specifically targeted Stelter's infamous interview with White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
Brian Stelter talking to the press secretary saying, what are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong? Like, hey, you're supposed to be a journalist.
And they wonder why they get no views.
That's pretty funny, man. The tension between Rogan and Stelter has been growing for weeks. It's still dog and pony because we know where both Rogan and Stelter are coming from, and we know what they promote. We know what they propagate. They're propagandists. The best thing to do so that you can keep a discerning eye on all this kind of stuff is just never check into the cult of personality. Don't check into Joe Rogan's cult of personality, Brian Stelter, CNN, Sean Hannity, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Brian Young from High Impact Flicks. Don't ever check in it, because then as soon as you do, you start cementing yourself into an echo chamber, and that's not a good place to be.
Guys, thanks for watching my video. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know, and don't forget to subscribe to my private email list through my website, highimpactflix.com. That way we can stay in touch in case they decide to completely eradicate this channel, which I'm very close right now. Also, don't forget to subscribe to me on my private members-only upload site, highimpacttv.com, and on Odyssey and BitChute. All my links are in the description below. If you want to support this channel further, the Patreon, PayPal, Bitcoin, and Subscribestar links are also in the description. Or grab a hard-hitting, conversation-starting shirt. I'll see you guys in the next heavily censored, shadow banned, 100% demonetized video.